Imagine a world where two of Asia's oldest civilizations, India and China, joined forces. A world where a powerful bloc of nearly 3 billion people reshaped global politics, creating a new center of gravity away from the West. This wasn't just a fantasy. It was a dream that India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru passionately believed in. But this dream would shatter in the icy peaks of the Himalayas, replaced by a legacy of distrust that continues to this day. How did it all go so wrong? This is the story of the friendship, the betrayal, and the war that forever changed Asia. When the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949, the world was a very different place. Most Western nations, led by the United States, refused to recognize Mao Zedong's communist government. But India, driven by Nehru's vision of a non-aligned, post-colonial Asia, took a different path. In 1950, India became one of the first non-communist countries to officially recognize the new China. Nehru saw this as more than just a diplomatic formality. He envisioned India and China, two ancient giants awakening from centuries of slumber, leading a new Asian renaissance. He believed that their friendship would stabilize the region and keep the meddling superpowers, America and the Soviet Union, at bay. India's early support wasn't just symbolic. After the Korean War in the early 1950s, China found itself deeply isolated on the world stage. It was India that stepped in, acting as a crucial mediator in ceasefire talks and helping to bring Beijing back into the fold of international diplomacy. For a while, it seemed like Nehru's vision was working. China was grateful, and the relationship between the two nations appeared to be blossoming. This spirit of cooperation reached its peak in 1954 with the signing of the Sino-Indian Friendship and Trade Agreement. This pact was built on the famous 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, or Panchale. These were beautiful, idealistic principles: mutual respect for each other's territory, non-aggression, non-interference, equality, and peaceful coexistence. It sounded like the perfect foundation for a lasting partnership. A key part of this agreement was India's formal recognition of Chinese sovereignty over Tibet. Nehru believed this was a necessary sacrifice. By acknowledging Tibet as part of China, he hoped to remove a major point of friction and build a deep, enduring trust between the two countries. It was a calculated risk, based on the hope that China would honor the spirit of their agreement. But that trust soon began to crumble. India and Tibet share a profound connection that goes back centuries. Tibetan Buddhism, the very heart of Tibetan culture, has its roots in India. So when the Chinese People's Liberation Army began to tighten its grip on Tibet with increasing brutality, it sent shockwaves through Indian society. The situation exploded in 1959 with the Tibetan Uprising. The spiritual leader of Tibet, the Dalai Lama, was forced to flee for his life. He crossed the treacherous mountain passes and sought refuge in India, where he was granted asylum. This single act infuriated Beijing, but for many Indians it was a moral imperative. They felt a deep sense of betrayal. India had recognized China's claim to Tibet in good faith, only to see Tibetan culture and people being crushed. The goodwill that India had so carefully cultivated was rapidly evaporating. As tensions over Tibet simmered, another, even more dangerous issue came to the forefront: the border. Two remote, sparsely populated, but strategically vital regions were in dispute. In the western sector, there was Aksai Chin, a high-altitude desert plateau in Ladakh. In the eastern sector, there was the region India called the Northeast Frontier Agency, or NEFA, known today as Arunachal Pradesh. China laid claim to both. To resolve the issue, China proposed what seemed like a simple swap deal. They suggested that India could keep NEFA, and in return, India would recognize Aksai Chin as Chinese territory. On the surface, it might have sounded like a practical compromise. But for Prime Minister Nehru, it was an impossible proposition. He argued that Aksai Chin had always been part of India on historical maps. And more importantly, a nation's sovereignty wasn't something you could trade away like a piece of merchandise. His rejection of the deal deepened the mistrust. The two nations were no longer talking the language of friendship, but of territorial claims and historical grievances. The path to conflict was becoming clearer. Then, in October 1962, the world held its breath. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in the Cuban Missile Crisis, a standoff that brought humanity to the brink of nuclear annihilation. With the world's attention fixed on the Caribbean, China saw its moment. It launched a massive coordinated military assault on Indian positions in both Aksai Chin and Nan Nefa. the Indian army was completely caught off guard. The Chinese victory was swift and decisive. Why? For years, China had been methodically preparing. They had built a strategic road through Aksai Chin, connecting their provinces of Xinjiang and Tibet, allowing them to move troops and supplies with ease. India, on the other hand, had virtually no infrastructure in these high-altitude regions. Its soldiers were poorly equipped, badly supplied, and politically unprepared for a full-scale war. The Chinese forces were battle-hardened and well-acclimatized to mountain warfare. They quickly overran Indian posts and captured the entire Aksai Chin plateau. For India, the defeat was not just a military loss. It was a profound national humiliation. The country's morale collapsed. The dream of Asian solidarity lay in ruins. A heartbroken Nehru later lamented, "Few examples exist in history where one country went out of its way to be friendly towards another, only to receive deceit and aggression in return." The shock of 1962 was a brutal awakening for India. The era of idealism was over. Until then, India's leadership had focused on diplomacy and non-alignment, deliberately keeping the military in a secondary role. After the war, that philosophy was thrown out the window. A new era of hard realism began. India embarked on a massive military modernization program. Over the next decade, the size of its army more than doubled. It created 10 new mountain divisions specifically trained and equipped to fight in the Himalayas and counter any future Chinese aggression. The naive trust was replaced by a deep-seated caution that continues to define India's China policy to this very day. The emotional scar of 1962 has never fully healed. So, what if things had gone differently? What if Nehru's dream had come true? Imagine an India and China that had managed to resolve their differences and build a genuine partnership. Their combined economic and demographic weight could have transformed the global balance of power. The Cold War rivalries between the US, the USSR, and China might have played out in a completely different way. A united Sino-Indian bloc could have become a powerful voice for the global South, challenging the dominance of the West. Asia's destiny would have been firmly in Asian hands. But that's not the world we live in. The reality is that the 1962 war created a permanent rift. It pushed India towards a path of military strength and strategic distrust, setting the stage for the complex and often tense relationship we see between the two giants today. The dream of brotherhood was buried in the snows of the Himalayas, leaving behind a legacy of rivalry that continues to shape our world. Thank you for watching. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into history and geopolitics. See you in the next video.